Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today we're taking a look at a conversation between a few university students, and it's pretty fascinating. They're talking about programming education, how it's being taught, and they're really concerned about how this whole AI thing is shaking things up.
Yeah, they seem to be hitting on something that's, well, it's a big deal. Like, we've got these transcripts and a summary of their conversation, and what really jumps out is they're basically asking, are universities even keeping up, with all the crazy advancements in AI?
It is moving incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're going to try to figure out today, right?
Yeah.
Like, are universities actually preparing students for a world where AI is, let's face it, going to be everywhere? Or are there some serious gaps in what they're teaching? And, for you listening, that's the question we're going to be trying to answer today. It's interesting because right off the bat, these students, they're kind of zeroing in on this disconnect. They're learning Python. They're learning R, these like fundamental programming languages. And they're basically saying, wait a minute, the way we're being taught this stuff feels really basic.
Yeah, almost like it's not really preparing them for the real world.
Exactly. And they have a pretty good point. Like, one of the examples they bring up is how exam questions in these courses, Python and R, are often so simple that they could literally just take a screenshot of the question, feed it into a basic AI tool like Kini, and boom, it spits out the answer.
No kidding. And that's making them wonder, what's the point, right? Like, if an AI can pass these tests without even breaking a sweat, what are they really learning that's going to be useful in the real world, where AI is becoming, well, it's basically becoming everything?
It is a very valid concern, especially when you consider that they believe focusing on AI programming itself could be a way more engaging and practical learning experience.
Right. It's not just about memorizing syntax and stuff anymore.
Yeah, they're talking about a completely different kind of learning. Like, imagine if these courses actually incorporated AI, right?
Yeah.
They could be doing all sorts of cool projects, actually tackling real-world problems using these advanced tools. It's so much more than just prepping for exams.
Absolutely. They're talking about getting creative, actually solving problems, really getting their hands dirty with this technology. And speaking of that, they had this interesting idea, didn't they, about how to get this ball rolling in universities.
Yeah, they suggested something like pilot programs, right?
Yeah.
Specifically for AI programming. Their thinking was start small, treat it like an MVP, a minimum viable product, test it out, see what works, and then, expand from there.
It makes a lot of sense. Instead of trying to overhaul the entire system right away, just dip their toes in the water, experiment a little bit. But as they kept talking, you could really sense their frustration building.
Yeah, it was like they were hitting a wall.
Yeah.
They were excited about all this,
Yeah.
right? About learning AI and everything, but they felt like the university was holding them back.
It's that classic tension between what students want and what institutions can actually deliver. But with this whole AI thing, it's like that tension is amplified 1,000 times over.
Oh, for sure. And they started getting into the reasons why,
Right.
right? Like, why is this happening? One of the biggest things they pointed out was how painfully slow everything moves in universities. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to change the curriculum, even just a little bit, it can take forever, right? Like 3 to 5 years, easily.
3 to 5 years. But think about it. In the AI world, that's practically a lifetime. Things are changing so fast that by the time a university gets around to approving a new AI course, the technology is already outdated. It's crazy.
It is. And then you've got another potential roadblock, and that's the faculty. Some professors might not be so keen on integrating AI into their teaching.
And you can understand why. They might not be familiar with it. They might be worried about how it'll change their role, all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And even if you could get past all that and start those pilot programs, it's still not a walk in the park, right?
Uh-huh.
You need approvals, you need resources, and that's a whole other headache.
And, something that they brought up that's really important is how much freedom regular universities even have to make these changes. It turns out a lot of the decisions about what courses are offered are actually made at the national level. So these universities, their hands are kind of tied.
And that's where the comparison with those top-tier universities comes in, right? Like Tsinghua and Peking University. It sounds like they have a lot more autonomy, and of course they have tons of resources, so they can adapt to these changes in AI much faster.
Makes you wonder if it's creating a two-tier system. The elite universities racing ahead with AI education while everyone else struggles to keep up.
Right, it's almost like a whole different world. And even getting students interested in AI seems to be a challenge at some universities. They mentioned Tongtong AI and how they were literally handing out flyers to try to get students on board.
It's crazy to think that in some places, AI is still this new kind of fringe thing.
You would think with all the hype, everyone would be jumping on board, but that's not necessarily the case. And that really highlights this resource and acceptance gap. Like, if you have to work that hard just to get students interested, how do you even get the funding and support to actually teach them about it?
It's a big challenge, and that's when they started talking about, well, what if individual teachers took the lead? What if they just started teaching AI programming on their own outside the official curriculum?
It's a nice thought, right. But then they hit the reality check.
Yeah.
Teachers already have so much on their plate with the set curriculum, the workload, everything. And AI is not exactly easy to teach. It's constantly changing, so
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time and effort to keep up.
And then there's the big question, right? Why would they do that? I mean, teachers are already stretched thin, so what's the incentive for them to take on even more, especially when it comes to something as demanding as AI?
It's a really good point, and unfortunately their conversation got cut short because they ran out of time.
Hmm.
But it kind of leaves you with this feeling that there's so much more to unpack here.
So much more to discuss. But even with the limited time, they really laid out some key issues. What we're hearing is a very real concern about whether the way we're teaching programming is still relevant in this age of AI. I mean, these students, they see the potential of AI programming. They're excited about it. They want to learn it. They believe it's crucial for their future. But they're hitting all these barriers within the university system.
It's the classic struggle of trying to adapt to a rapidly changing world. But in this case, the pace of change is just mind-blowing. It's not just about tweaking the curriculum a little bit. It's about fundamentally rethinking how we prepare students for a future that's going to be dominated by AI. And that leads us to the question for all of you listening. How do we bridge this gap? How can universities, especially those that might not have the resources of those top-tier schools, actually keep up with AI and make sure their students are ready for what's coming? It's a big question, but it's one we all need to be thinking about.
Exactly, because this is not just an academic problem, it's a societal one. If we don't figure this out, we risk leaving a whole generation behind.
And the clock is ticking.
It really is. All right, that's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.